Is pitmaster unemployment insurance a thing? Well, today I'm going to find out if I need it or not, because I'm firing up the brand new Kamado Joe Konnected Joe to cook the lowest maintenance possible brisket on Kamado Joe's newest grill. So the Konnected Joe is the newest Joe in the Kamado Joe lineup for 2023. And so just like we need to make some modifications to our game plan to account for the toys that exist, like the automatic fire starter or the integrated Wi-Fi control, so too do I need to make some adjustments to how I cook brisket based on the tools that don't exist. Gone is the slow roller that comes in my Big Joe Series 3, the charcoal basket, the 3-tier divide and conquer rack, and like my Big Joe Series 1, we are back down 4 inches in height like the Big Joe Series 2 and Classic Series 2. This is what the Konnected Joe is based off of. So not only do we have some new toys coming into the picture, we are missing a few old friends. And so I'm really curious to see how all of this comes together to find out if the grill of the future means I'm out of a future. Let's find out. So for my easiest brisket ever, let me tell you about the homemade rub that we're gonna make to turn out an amazing brisket. Ugh. Making your own rub sounds like way too much work. Why do that when I could use one of these 3 pre-made #1 selling Texas barbecue rubs? I think I'll go with Goldie's for today. Okay, fine, but since I'm still cooking a choice grade brisket from Costco, one of my favorite hacks when prepping a brisket is to shave off the fat, render that down, make my own tallow, and inject it. So let me tell you how we're gonna do that. Make your own tallow. What is this, the Dark Ages? Why does Amazon exist if not to deliver this to my door? Well, while I figure what to do with myself, let me, through the powers of the space-time continuum, send you back to yesterday to show you what I did to get the brisket ready for this morning's smoke session. This is about a 17-pound packer. Let's get it out, pat it dry. Let's give it a quick trim here, starting on the bottom, which will not be my presentation side. Take you fast forward. I'm just looking for any of this stringy or hard fat. Not going to spend too much time as we are keeping this a quick and easy brisket. Okay, that looks good. We got most of our silver skin. Let's flip it over, work on our presentation side, and start finding anything that's going to burn, like this bit of loose fat as well as some meat in here. I wouldn't throw this out if I was doing this normally. This will go in a burger grind, but we're going to take this flap off. You see that's good stuff to be adding into your burger grind. Okay, our brisket's looking pretty good. We've got, working with what we had some uneven stuff right from the butcher where we were right almost down to our meat. So an uneven fat cap, but I've tried to keep it where I can control that to about 1/4 inch. So normally this is what we would throw in a pot, add a cup or 2 of water and let that simmer for an hour or 2 till we are left with just our tallow. But since we're doing the quick and easy brisket, I'm just gonna go ahead and inject our Wagyu beef tallow. If it hasn't firmed up on me in this cooler weather. Start to make some pockets in our flat. Do that where you can see here. Pump some in until it leaks. Rub any of that leftover on our brisket so it'll act as a bit of a binder, even though our brisket patted dry is still pretty damp out of the package. Let's not waste any of our Wagyu tallow. Okay, this looks good. Let's add our rub for the overnight dry brine. And on our rack. See you in the morning. Okay, since ash cleanup is a little bit different without the basket, let me just show you that. Since we've got our charcoal and some leftover ash sitting right on top of our automatic fire starter. I don't want to leave any of this ash in because I found if we were to not do our cleaning work here and turn the fan on, that's just going to blow up into our food. So using a glove, I'm just going to shake this all down into the ash collector. Take a fast forward for that. Looks good. Let's get the ash collector out. So just like any traditional Kamado Joe, all of our ash falls down here. I'll try and get an angle that you can actually see, but there's a bit of a deeper than normal channel for our ash collector tool. So you can see everything that I shook down fell through those holes into our ash collector. So I'll take you fast forward and I'll try and get an angle where you can actually see the depth of this cavity, but I just want to make sure, looking down in there, that I do a couple scoops, make sure that I get absolutely everything that fell. So you can see a second shovel, I think, has collected most of that. So like normal, I'm gonna bury a piece of smoking wood, this is oak, right at the bottom. Now, the one thing I am interested in, if this makes a difference, is with the automatic fire starter, we have this ring that's gonna ignite our coal, so our fire is actually starting from the bottom, whereas when I use the torch, it's starting from the top. So we'll see in future cooks if I actually wanna switch from going wood on the bottom and charcoal coal on the top, but since I've got about nearly 15 years of that working really well, I'm gonna stick with what I know for today and place a piece of smoking wood right on the bottom, and then we're going to cover that up with some extra charcoal. To help preheat our deflectors, I'm just going to drop in the accessory rack. I will note though, in my first cook where I did steak, I'm used to the dome temperature gauge being on the front. The computer temperature gauge, just like the pellet Joe, is on the back. So when I installed my deflectors in my normal sort of pizza slice configuration, which allows these to get warm and have heat come up and register on the dome, it was actually blocking this back sensor and we overheated from what I want. So I'm going to do the inverse today, since the computer is in control, and put my pie towards the back so that the pit can actually read the temperature. That's the first step, our automatic fire starter. Next, let's set our temperature. We're going to have to close the bottom draft door here like the computer prompt tells us, since the fan is going to be providing the air versus manual control. Set our target temperature, actually 225 looks great. And I'm going to adjust the top vent to very slightly open, so this is below the first line. Let me show you that. So this is our control tower top. So normally on the control tower top, this first line would be about 250 degrees. If I was to go about 1/8 of an inch or so past, it'd be 270 degrees. And if I wanted 225 like we've set up, I would come almost to the other side the same amount, 1/8 of an inch. That would give it that. But when we have a fan controlling things, I can actually even feel the air coming out of the control tower top, because the fan is pushing that up through the automatic fire starter. What you want is about 50% more of a reduction. This is the same if you were using a pit controller, because the pit controller is going to be forcing that air out, and if it gets a little bit carried away, it needs the brakes to help slow things down. If we had it too open and the fan was to get aggressive, there's just nothing to slow this down, and it would take a really long time for the grill to settle in wherever we had our vent, which is about 270 degrees right now. So we're going to go, instead of what I would normally do for 225, 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more inside this first line, we're going to go about 50% more, which is giving sort of the brake pedal effect, and the fan being our gas. So we are nearly up to temperature, but I'm noticing we might have a little bit too much spring in our airlift hinge, as it's not holding that seal. So I am just going to back off our airlift hinge nut here a little bit. So maybe after our cook, I'm gonna have to play with our latch here to try and get that to hold it down a little bit better, as we are still leaking a ton of smoke. Okay, you can see our automatic fire starter is off after 15 minutes. I set it for 225, so we did overshoot a little bit by just over about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So maybe there'll be a software update where I can give that just a little bit less time, since I think maybe 10 minutes would have been perfect. Let's come nice and close, set up the rest of our double indirect setup. Take out our deflectors. We're actually going to drop them down to a lower position so you can see down in here. I hope you can see we've got a nice glowing coal bed, but as we suspected, all on the bottom versus up top, versus that's what I'm used to. Drop our heat soaked deflectors right down on the bottom of our divide and conquer rack. I made sure when I added charcoal not to fill up to the point where the charcoal will be touching the bottom of our deflectors. We do want to get airflow around that. Smokeware drip pan acting as a water pan today. Our accessory rack above, a spare set of deflectors or a pizza stone if that's what you have. An actual drip pan. I'm just curious to see if it'll actually fit underneath of our rack system. It looks like it might actually clear. It does. Our cooking grids. Let's grab our brisket. So I've brought along a couple of wood chunks just to help this entire 17-pound Packer brisket fit. You could use a rib rack if you had one of those, but a little bit more accessible and inexpensive is something like wood chunks. So we're going to just get our brisket on a bit of a curve like this, and once it starts to shrink up, we'll no longer need these little props. Take a fast forward while I work these in. I've angled the brisket towards the back like this, as I do want to mind our temperature probe. So if I was to put it up the other way, I don't want it to the meat touching the probe that's controlling the computer, and I don't want the meat touching the visual gauge that I'm looking at. So that's why I've opted to orient it this way. Let's grab our temperature probe. So this is plugged into probe port number 1 and the bottom of our Konnected Joe. Go right in the point. And just since I'm curious if the information will be identical or not, I'm going to go in almost the same spot with a meter probe, just so I can compare the two. Trust in tools is earned, not guaranteed, so that will help give me a baseline comparison for the information. Let's close this up, get cooking. So after about an hour, I bumped the temperature up to 270 degrees. We can get some smoke. For my own curiosity, I just want to know if the Konnected Joe will work similar to what I'm used to. Actually, I can see glowing hot coals down in the ash collector tool. So I'm going to drop in a piece of smoking wood along with some chips, which before I opened this, didn't know that I would see down here. But just drop some of those in so we can get some supplemental smoke now that we are about an hour in. Slide this back into place, close our door. All right, we're about 3.5 hours in. Let's take a look. As you can tell, all I've done is add just a little bit of foil here to protect the end of our brisket. This is 17 pounds full packer in a classic, just a little bit tight on space. But I think it started to shrink up enough. I've gained some extra room that we can remove our wood chunks and start to get this to take a proper shape of laying out flat. Get that with a little bit of water spray, just on the edges here where it is ever so slightly starting to dry. Let's go check out our smoking wood situation, see what that looks like in our ash drawer. Okay, we're recovering temp after closing our dome. Let's see what the status is. Completely gone. Status is gone. So I'm gonna take these smoking wood chunks, if I can get them to fit, that were underneath our brisket. It might be a little big. No, I'm gonna get smaller chunks. I thought I might be in luck and be able to use these. Be right back. Okay, let's add a couple more fresh smoking wood chunks. You want to do this right after you spray so that there's moisture on the protein for the smoke to adhere to. And this again is an advantage of a double indirect setup, as we are burning much more charcoal. I didn't mention earlier, this is why we filled the charcoal basket. I suspect we'll be nearly out, if not running out of charcoal, based on the fuel consumption we're using here at 270 degrees Fahrenheit, which was enough to completely burn these up. Let's add this back in. Okay, we're now at about 180 degrees internal temperature. So for this last stretch of the journey, I would like to move us to a boat. So I'll take it fast forward, transfer our brisket over here, wrap up a boat. Okay, that looks good. Even though we've got our double indirect set up, I still love a boat in a Kamado because all of the heat is coming up from the bottom, which is just going to be stretching the limits of what the bottom of this brisket can take. So this is going to help stop cooking on the bottom, make sure it doesn't tear, but it's going to allow our bark to get a little bit further along. We've got some right here on this high part, which was sitting up near the dome, but as you can see on our fat cap, this bark is not ready, and this is at 180. So it needs a little bit more time to develop that bark. So it's going to accelerate the cook now to about 10 degrees Fahrenheit per hour on average is what I've experienced. Once we're in the boat, it's going to help collect any of this tallow that pulls out. We can pour back over when it rests, protect the bottom, and let us get a little bit more color on our bark. So I think we are ready to go to our final stage. I'll rejoin you in a little bit when it's ready to do our taste test. Okay, the meter and the grill let me know we're both are reading 200 degrees at the same spot here and the point. So now I want to check more for feel and tenderness. So I've just got a hand probe. It's reading much lower up here, again about 5-6 inches away, but it feels like what you want a point to feel. So I'm going to call that done. Check over here. That's a little tight. I'm going to give this just a little bit longer, reading 201, 202 in the flat. And I want, just like we saw here up in the point, where it feels like going into a soft jar of peanut butter. I just let go and it wants to fall right to the bottom and poke the foil. But while I have the grill open, I will just point this a little bit to the side so I can get some of that tallow off the bark. Give a little bit of a chance for it to dry up so it's not pooling. And we'll save that tallow and pour it back over after the rest. But the fat cap is feeling exactly what you want. We've got great rendered fat cap on top that's squishy, soft. I think this is going to be good. So a couple more minutes on here, maybe 15-20 minutes. I'll wrap it up, let it rest for a minimum of 2 hours. I'll rejoin you for the taste test. So while we're just a couple minutes away from our foil towel cooler rest to be complete and let me know how the least hands-off brisket cook actually tastes, I thought it'd be a good opportunity now to open up our Konnected Joe and see how much fuel consumption we used. I know the water will be gone from previous water pan tests, but to just confirm that, let's come nice and close, take a look inside. We've got that all done. We can move over to the outdoor kitchen and slice into our brisket and see if I really am at a serious concern of losing a job here. All right, start removing everything with our cooking grids first. This is why you do want a drip pan. As you can see, that's just how much tallow and fat was rendered and pushed out before moving to our foil boat, which would contain that. If we didn't do that, all of this would be in the bottom of our grill. So I'm glad I did that. If not, I maybe wish I had put some foil on it so I don't have to clean it, but that's for another time. Remove our deflector stones. Accessory ring, as expected, are now completely dry. Water pan, that was our second smokeware pan. Our bottom deflectors, still holding on to a couple embers here, even a couple hours later. And as you can see, we didn't get through all of it. I was a little worried that we actually might with the double indirect, but we have used up nearly an entire basket of coal. And on my old Series 3 Classic, I used to get about 24 hours running at the same temperature, 250 to 270 degrees. I got all the way up to 56 hours on my Big Joe. So we are definitely using more fuel, which on my normal grills is a good thing because that imparts more flavor. Let's find out if we got the same benefit here from our Konnected Joe. Meet you over by the kitchen for our taste test. All right, moment of truth. Our Konnected Joe brisket has completed its 2-hour rest and we are ready to slice into it. It certainly looks good. Let's come nice and close, see how we did. All right, we did pretty well. As I mentioned earlier, this fat cap is completely rendered super squishy. We've got a nice jiggle. Bark's pretty good as far as Kamado barks go. I have done better on my offset, but we weren't cooking on that today. Let's slice into it, starting up the half section here with the point and the flat. Get our cross section here. Immediately tell all sorts of tallow. Pretty good smoke ring, top and bottom. Let's check the other side. Again, don't really want to squeeze that all out, but if I was to, you can just tell it's gushing with juices. Let's protect that from oxidizing here. And I'm going to do the same thing, get some slices. So I'm going to go this way for our point end and get a slice. I'm going to go a little bit further up here. We'll start with our slices on our flat. See how we did. So we're definitely flapping, touching both ends, no problem. Slight tug. There's actually a little bit more tug there than I'd like. It's not bad. But that's right here feeling a little tough. Let me get another piece, see if it's just that one. Grab another piece of our flat. Ooh, it's hot. So we've still got the flap. And again, maybe a little bit more tug than I'd like there. The fat cap is completely rendered. We're a little tough here, so I think we could have gone with a little bit more time. But we'll see how it tastes. Put my flat pieces here. So let's dig in. Just like I saw earlier with the probe, the point was absolute butter where the probe just almost wanted to fall through and puncture the foil, and our flat remained a little tough. In hindsight, probably I still came off a little bit early. Maybe another 20-30 minutes is what I need. I checked it again and I thought I was there, but maybe a little bit of a misclick on the tenderness. But we'll see how it tastes. I'm going to start with the flat because I know the point feels amazing. Let's get a piece. We've got good color, good smoke ring, good bark. Everything here is promising. Lots of rub on this piece, so let's do that. Cheers. To the chew, it's not bad. I know I'm being critical with the tug, but it's still pretty good. So what can we start to decipher here in terms of what the difference is? In terms of our tallow injection, I'm going to call this one no difference. Now I've tested this before, and again, my bias here is you're overpaying for Wagyu beef tallow when you sort of wrap your brisket or inject it into it. Because using the stuff you got for free and would otherwise throw away, or don't throw it away, use it in a burger grind or something like that, it just doesn't make that difference when you are tasting a brisket that's been on a smoker all day. Am I getting some tallow on the board from the brisket itself, from the tallow we injected? Absolutely. Is it worth the 30 bucks or so for the Wagyu tallow? Again, I have said and will continue to say, no, there's no appreciable difference here versus what I would do the manual ways. I'm going to call the tallow one sort of, a busted in terms of no improvement for doing things yourself. If anything, we can't flavor this the way I've done before, where I mix in some flavors like garlic, rosemary, or thyme, or things like that to give a little bit of a flavor customization depending on what we're cooking. In terms of the rub, we didn't make our own rub. We went the Goldie's rub. Flavor is very similar, a lot more salt forward, particularly on the crust. And so I think we were using something more like table salt here versus what I would be using, mostly Diamond Crystal Kosher salt as well as Lowry's. It's not night and day different, but that's in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% more salt flavor than what I do in my homemade rub. So more to come on that. The reason I bought all three rubs is I love learning from what great minds and pitmasters are doing. So I'm going to be doing a future video comparing all three of those rubs, as well as then how do we recreate it ourselves. So make sure you have the notification bell turned on so you're alerted when that comes out. Enough about that though, let's try our point. Feels nice and soft. Point is always so good. That is really good. And if anything here, where I was noticing a bit more salt on our flat, it's getting washed out a little bit with the richness of the higher levels of intermuscular fat. I could probably get away with adding even more on the point. It said go very modestly on the instructions, so maybe I'll adjust my ratios for the flat and the point a little bit different. In terms of smoke and our double indirect, I'm not getting any bad smoke by any means. And so we've gone through a bunch of wood chips, so you're not getting what's easy to do on a Kamado, which is bad smoke. So this has, if you've never used a Kamado style grill before and you do what I did here today, you're gonna turn out good quality smoke. What I am noticing is similar when I've done my Big Joe Series 1 that I bought with my double indirect setup versus the Big Joe Series 3 with my slow roller. I gave a slight win to my double indirect setup with the slow roller. And again, that was double indirect versus double indirect. The slow roller did add that extra little bit. The claim is that it circulates air 20 times more, and that shows up in the bark that you could see, and I saw a slight difference in those two cooks that I did side by side, as well as the taste. This is mighty fine, but does it stand up or compete or beat my absolute best effort on a Kamado? It doesn't beat it, but then I have to say the fact that it came that close with me doing absolutely nothing is a little bit terrifying. So coming back to, again, what I shared in my unboxing bias, is this grill for me? No, I don't like wires and Wi-Fi between me and my food. And while I had a very productive Saturday, was able to get lots of stuff done around the house, I kind of like kicking the tires and hanging around, puttering, playing with the fire, and really dialing things into my own preference, which I can absolutely do with the Konnected Joe if I wanted to do it manual. But today was a test on autopilot where we let the grill take control and run everything on its own. If you're one of those people on a market, you've been looking at pellet grills, things like Traegers, etc., where I've had one before. I've done a test when the Pellet Joe came out. You can't really sear very well on a pellet grill, or at least most of them. Try and cook something like pizza or steak, or even something like the smoke profile that you can get on a brisket. I just think they never hold a candle to what you can do on a Kamado. I've done my Series 3 versus a Traeger with ribs, and not only did I, but everybody I shared them with picked the Kamado Joe. And so the fact that this Konnected Joe brings this utility and the similar functionality to that set it and forget it, I could understand why it will appeal to many other people not named James in terms of wanting to let the computer take over. That's it for today though. I'm James from Soaking Dad Barbecue signing off. Hope you really enjoyed that one. If you've got a wish list, things you'd like to see the Konnected Joe do next, be sure to let me know down in the comments below. But that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Don't be afraid to fire it up.